Alright guys, so today we're going to be reacting to German mega tanks. Uh, Again, we're going to enter into the German inventions back in the World War II. So hopefully we're going to learn more about what was going on back then and how the German intuition in let's say like not the lack of resources, but the demand of creating more efficient technology for combat against their enemy was part of the, not culture, but necessity, right? So we have today German mega tanks, P1000 Ratte, whatever is that. I don't, not even ask me how to read that. I'm not gonna even do it. Thank you so much for the support. Thank you so much for a lot of you guys' comments. Again, there's a lot of comments. I'm just trying my best to just go and reply to your comments. In the meantime, let's just jump in. Make sure you like, subscribe. But for now, let's just enjoy the video.
German World War II superweapons. People can't get enough of them. The History Channel certainly couldn't back in the early 2000s. Throughout World War II, Germany built some of the biggest weapon systems that the world has ever seen. The go-to examples are the Schwer Gustav and the sister gun, the Dora. They were, and still are,
we reacted
the
that
biggest
one.
railway guns that were ever built. Weighing at over 1,400 tons, they could fire 7-ton shells up to 40 kilometers away at a rate of 1 round every 40 minutes. It's almost like a work of science fiction. The sheer scale of the gun is mind-boggling.
Kaboom!
One of the guns saw its first and only combat in the siege of Sevastopol.
Like a
Its
choke and
biggest
solver.
accomplishment during
Boom!
the siege was when it blew up an undersea ammo dump. The ammunition dump was 30 meters under the Black Sea with 10 meters of concrete protection. Other massive German constructions include the massive submarine pens, which could even take direct hits from some of the biggest bombs that England could muster. Another weapon system is the La Cupola, a V2 rocket base in France. Its goal was to streamline the amount of time needed between V2 rocket launches. We're going to be focusing on a mega weapon that wasn't built. This weapon's development would have been more daunting to engineers than the other 3 projects that I just mentioned. I'm talking about the Land Cruiser P1000 Ratte. Originally purposed by the director of Krupp in 1942, it would be a tank that would symbolize the power of German engineering. It would be so big that it would be in a new class of tank. The German army had several tank designations. There were light tanks like the Panzer I and II, medium tanks such as the Panzer III, IV and V, the Panzer V being better known as the Panther, heavy tanks like the Panzer VI, which referred to the Tiger and the King Tiger, or in German Königstiger.
The Tigers were.
And now we get to
common.
the heaviest class of tank actually produced, super heavy tank. Only one actual super heavy tank design was made. This was the Panzer VIII, or better known as Maus. The Maus weighed 180 tons and sported a turret with a 128mm
That's
gun.
big, bro. That's big. Man, is that real? Is that like a AI picture or something? Man, that's real, bro.
2 Maus tanks were made, but never got out of the testing phase. There are rumours that a Maus was used in the defence of a testing facility it was based at. There's no evidence to back up the claims of it though. The Panzer 1000 Ratte would be classed as a land cruiser, most likely due to the fact that it looks like a ship that is taken to the land.
Yeah.
The P1000 was first proposed to Hitler in June 1942. The idea was for a tank to be armed with naval ship guns. The land cruiser would also be heavily armoured to stop any tank or artillery from being able to damage it. Design drawings were organised and shown to Hitler later that year in December 1942. Hitler was ecstatic with the new designs of his super heavy tank and thus christened it the Ratte. The specification of the Ratte had the frontal armour at 250mm thick.
See, they were hungry
Sloped
for
areas
inventions.
of the frontal armour would increase its effective thickness to over 300 to even 350mm depending on the angle of the armour. The main ornament of the Ratte would have been a modified warship gun turret. The original design of the turret was used in the German capital ship Gneisenau. The design had 3 280mm guns in one turret. The turret on the Ratte would have removed the middle gun in the triple turret. Using data from the version of this gun that was made and used on the battleship shows us how the same gun mounted on the Ratte would have performed. Armor-piercing rounds weighing 300 kilograms would have a maximum range of just under 36.
Imagine that thing in a tank. Imagine a piece of this equipment in a tank. The GG, bro.
and a half kilometers.
It-
For the guns to shoot to their maximum range, they would need to be elevated up to their maximum height of 40 degrees. One interesting thing is that the gun turret used on the Ratte may have been one of the exact same turrets used on the Gneisenau. In early 1942, the Gneisenau was badly damaged in a port strike by British bombers. The ship underwent a lengthy repair process, which was changed into an upgrade for the old ship. The old 28cm guns and 15cm turrets would be refitted with larger guns up to 38cm. Hitler cancelled the upgrade in December 1942. The ship was disarmed and its 15cm and 28cm guns were then mounted into coastal batteries. Hitler was showing the Ratte plans in December 1942, so it is quite possible that one of the turrets from the ship may have been mounted onto the Ratte as it would cut down on the production costs. Whilst the twin gun turret is the main feature of this tank, that's not where the armament stops. There are disputes about where an additional 128mm gun would have been placed.
Wow,
some sources say
look
that
at
it would
that.
be mounted facing forward in the hull, in a similar way to the French Char B or the American M3 Lee. Other thoughts are that there would have been two 128mm guns, and each one would be in their own turrets that
You'll get squashed. With your tank, you get squashed. This is too exaggerated, bro. Look at that.
either
It's way
side
too big,
at the
man.
rear of the engine.
Way too big.
There's also a third theory that the 128mm gun would be mounted in the main turret. It would have been mounted in the middle between the two guns. This theory isn't as likely as the first two theories. Additional smaller caliber weapons would be used to defend the vehicle from air and infantry attack. Multiple 20mm gun positions will be scattered about the Ratte, some of them quad mounts. The anti-aircraft guns would be on the rear engine deck, and possibly two of the 20mm guns will be mounted on top of the main turret itself. Two heavy machine guns in ball mounts would be utilised for close infantry defence. Their location may have been either on the front or one on each side of
That's
the Ratte.
big, man.
The Ratte's hull length would be 35 meters long and 14 meters wide. It would be standing tall at 11 meters all the way to the top of the turret. Total crew inside would be variable depending on the internal layout. It is thought that the
10
crew
meters.
may be anywhere between 20 men at least minimum to maybe around 40. The crew count could possibly be higher though. Inside the Ratte, there were plans to have a vehicle storage bay for motorcycles, an infirmary, and also several assorted storage rooms. With the weight of all the armour, men, guns and ammunition, the Ratte would weigh a lot. During the design phase, it was estimated that the Ratte would weigh 1,000 tons. Theoretically, the Ratte was planned to be able to achieve 44 km per hour, but me personally, I don't think it would have been possible for it to achieve those speeds.
That would be too
Yes,
much.
the power plant was huge. The Ratte would have been using twin submarine engines that together could produce 13,000 kilowatts, which is around 17,000 horsepower. Very impressive engine power, especially when you compare it to my car, which has 60 horsepower. What I find interesting is that even though it sounds impossible, the power to weight ratio does actually check out. It should in theory be possible for the Ratte to achieve over 40 km per hour. Let's compare the power to weight ratio with a Tiger tank. The Tiger tank could produce 515 kilowatts to move 54 tons of weight, giving us 9.5 kilowatts per ton for a maximum speed of 45 km per hour.
Okay.
The Ratte could produce 13,000 kilowatts to move 1,000 tons. This gives us 13 kilowatts per ton, giving us a maximum speed of 44 kilometers per hour. So yes, in theory, the Ratte should be able to achieve over 40 kilometers per hour, but this figure doesn't take into account a multitude of factors, such as friction from the track, and even if the suspension could handle high speeds. It also doesn't take into account the Ratte's actual weight.
Man,
The
look
weight
how
was
big
meant
is
to be
that.
1,000
Wow.
tons, but the turret already weighed 600 tons when it was mounted on the ship. The mouse, when it was being planned, was originally going to weigh 100 tons. It ended up weighing 188 tons. The 1,000 ton number is most likely because Hitler seemed very fond of that big number. Hitler liked big grand showpieces. For
Yeah.
example, he
Ego.
greenlit the 1,000
Big
times
ego.
1,000 bomber project, which resulted in Focke-Wulf producing the 1,000 times 1,000 times 1,000 plane. The project was for a plane to be able to carry a bomb that weighed 1,000 kilograms for a distance of 1,000 kilometers at a speed of 1,000 kilometers per hour. So
Okay.
yes,
Yeah.
the estimated weight of the Ratte would most certainly be more than 1,000 tons, theoretically completely making it unlikely to be able to reach its estimated speed of 44 kilometers per hour.
You see what I'm saying? It looks fake, man. It's like an AI picture or
With its low
something.
speed, the Ratte would have had difficulties getting to the front lines in any theatre of war. No bridge in Europe would have been able to support its weight. Transport by rail would have been out of the question. Breaking down the Ratte for transportation by rail would take far too much time and effort for the mammoth task of reassembling it back together again. A positive thing about the Ratte is that it had 2 meters of ground clearance, so off-roading shouldn't have been too much of an issue, unless if it hit a boggy area. How would recovery of such a vehicle even take place? The weight of the Ratte was spread over 6 tracks, 3 on each side of the tank. Each track was 1.2 meters wide, giving a combined track width of 7.2 meters between all 6 tracks. The Ratte is not the first multi-tracked tank. Before the end of the war, America had produced the T-28, which has 4 tracks. There's also the Russian tank Object 279, which also has 4 tracks, but that was produced post-war. The Ratte would be the first tank in history to have 6 tracks. The Ratte would have just been a massively impractical weapon. It may have been easier to use railway guns, like the K5, which could be transported on standard train networks throughout Europe. It's even the same caliber gun at 28 centimeters.
Wow, look at that, man.
The K5 could lob 250
I cannot. I still see it and I cannot even believe it.
Shells up to
Looks
65
scary.
kilometers away.
How humans can do
Even
that.
the Carl siege mortars are more mobile than the Ratte. With a 60 centimeter barrel, they could lob 2-ton shells up to 42 kilometers away.
Scary.
The Carls could even be transported by rail, although admittedly they did need to be broken down a little bit and then reassembled on the other side. Both of these heavy weapons are massively complicated, but in comparison
grabbing it like
to the
nothing.
Ratte,
Look at that.
they are merely a fraction of what it would have cost to build the Ratte. If the Ratte was to throw a track, the mechanics in charge of the Ratte would most likely enter a suicide pact with each other instead of trying to fix the issue. Multi-track tanks are notoriously difficult to maintain. The Object 279 and T-28 were never mass-produced. At least those tanks are lighter in comparison to this and could be easily recovered and taken to a maintenance workshop for repair. How would you recover the Ratte and possibly all 2,000 tons of it? Another massive weakness of the Ratte would be its vulnerability to air attacks. While it would have been armed with 8
it's a bigger target. If you are playing and you see that big thing, you have to throw only, not only you throw a bunch of them. You might hit those bunches. You might hit the tank with all those bunches because the tank is covering too much land.
The aircraft guns.
So
these guns could only wade off planes that were relatively close. With the Ratte's size, high-altitude bombing would have been a viable option, and there's no defense for that kind of attack. Well, there is one defense, and that's having air superiority. If you didn't have air superiority, there was no way to guarantee the Ratte's safety. The Luftwaffe was not doing so well 1942 onwards. Any further development and research of the Ratte was stopped by Germany's Ministry of Arms Albert Speer in early 1943. He called it a waste of resources, which it most certainly was. Even if it does look awesome, the pros of this tank are massively outweighed by the very, very long list of cons. The P1000 wasn't the only...
Well, what if you make the tank bigger in that way, like big, but then you might have to do it with a different material, a lighter material.
Land cruiser.
No, you don't say like maybe.
There was a second proposed Land Cruiser design, the P1500
That's too big.
Monster. The Monster was a way to make the Schwer Gustav 800mm gun mobile. The Monster would have been even bigger than the Ratte, with even more engineering challenges behind
That's not
it.
real, bro.
It has been estimated to weigh 1,500 tons, but again, that's another optimistic number as the Schwer Gustav weighed 1,400 tons. The design of the Monster had the 800mm gun fixed facing forward. To aim, the Monster would turn its hull in the direction it wished to fire.
Wow, look at that,
The
bro.
total length of the Monster would be 125 meters, with a width
It's
of
an
18.
8-wheeler.
Without its gun elevated, the height of the Monster would be 12 meters. The Monster would have had a minimum crew of at least 100 people, and even that number is optimistic. This figure is neglecting also the amount of support staff needed, so the estimated crew number will be substantially higher. While there would be armor on the Monster, it wouldn't be protecting the crew manning the 800mm gun. While it was thought that the armor will be 250mm thick, my guess is that it is structural for the weight of the gun rather than for the protection of the
See, that
vehicle.
looks so
The
fake,
Monster
man.
would have been used in the same way that the Schwer Gustav was, which is in an artillery support role rather than a direct fire.
Or you conquer a nation, and then just to put some fear on people, right? Let's say you want to put some fear in some folks, you literally march without a big tank, and it's game over. That's it, because they get intimidated. Nobody is thinking about that. If you see a tank that big walking through your streets, I'm sorry, you'll feel intimidated. I will use the tank for that purpose.
This is different from the Ratte, which was viewed more as a mobile.
See, the small ones intimidate if you have a lot of them, but you got the Ratte and a couple of those small ones. That's it, man.
Assisting elite panzer
play psychologically.
What is kind of odd is that there's two secondary weapons mounted onto the monster. Two 15cm howitzers. Kind of unnecessary and pointless next to the massive 80cm gun that could fire 7-ton shells.
Push!
No actual designs of the monster survived the war, so no one is exactly quite sure what it would have looked like. There are two main schools of thought of what the monster would have looked like. Design 1 is a motorized gun platform, similar to a self-propelled artillery.
Man, that's big, bro.
The gun is fixed forward.
Too much.
The hull would have to rotate to
way
face
exaggerated,
forward to
man.
attack.
That's too big.
The tracks would have a similar setup to the Ratte. 6 in total, 3 on each side. The second design would have had the gun suspended between two motorized tracked carriages, very similar in design to the theoretical mobile railway gun design. The design I'm referring to.
They were inventing, bro. They were trying to make it happen, bro. They were very obsessed with the tanks.
The 28cm K5 railway gun onto two Tiger chassis, allowing it to be independent from tracks. My guess is that if the monster was to be built, Design 1 would have been chosen over Design 2, as it's much more straightforward.
Yep.
Hitler personally gave the monster the green light for development, only to have it again cancelled by Albert Speer in 1943. If the Ratte was a waste of time, the monster would have been a humongous waste of time. With Germany losing on multiple fronts, there had to be a shift in strategy employed against Germany's numerous enemies. No more did the German army have the luxury of sieging their enemy's strongpoints. Unlike Sevastopol, the German army couldn't hang about waiting to accumulate large amounts of artillery to flatten the enemy strongholds. The war was going mobile, and not in the old 1940s blitzkrieg sort of way. The Russian army was moving relentlessly over a massive frontier, reclaiming their lost territory. Germany needed weapons that could be transported quickly to an advancing enemy position and to plug in gaps and breakthrough attempts in the front lines. The slow lumbering P1500 could theoretically do 15 km per hour. The power plant would have been 4 submarine engines producing 1,600 kilowatts of power. I'm not even going to bother to calculate the kilowatt per ton because there's no surviving designs of what the monster would have looked like. One issue with the 80cm gun was the massive amount of recoil from the blast when firing
that's another thing.
shells.
Yep.
When it was mounted,
the recoil will be very interesting.
On its dual railway configuration, it had the freedom to use its weight as a recoil dampener. The opposite reaction of the blast was turned into friction between the wheels and the tracks.
It will
as the
break.
gun assembly rolled backwards. There were also 4 massive recoil dampeners to reduce the gun's kickback. If a Schwer Gustav was to fire on unreinforced tracks, it will splinter them due to the massive forces behind the shell. The track under the Gustav had additional bracing. Here's a good photo showing the bracing on the gun. If you were to mount the 80cm gun into a vehicle, the suspension would need to be fixed before firing. The monster would most likely also have additional braces around the upper area.
Well, if you have a recoil where it can go on the top at least, kaboom, move far enough and then come back, you don't need, you still will need it. Because that means in the top goes back and forward, you still have energy at the front that is going to still move the tank. So it'll be interesting.
And the braces would assist in dispersing the gun's recoil into the ground around the vehicle. Let's play around with the theory that Germany actually went ahead to build one of each of the Ratte and the Monster. Krupp would have been the manufacturers of the Ratte and Monster. They were the powerhouse of German production throughout the war. Purely on steel alone, the amount needed to be pulled from other production lines would have been insane. Germany had to import most of its metal throughout World War II. When the war took a turn for the worst, the quality and quantity of the imported resources decreased. The amount of steel needed for a Ratte would be close to that needed of a ship.
Wow.
A Tiger H1 weighs around 53 tons. not all of it is steel, but just bear with me here. For 1,000 tons, 19 Tiger tanks could have been made. Or, if tanks are not your jam, you could have had 135 88mm anti-aircraft guns. If you don't want AA guns, how about 200 of the German mass-produced jet, the Me-262?
Oh, so they have jets. So they have the jets.
There's a lot more to production than just having available resources. But what I'm trying to show is the
Hey, some of you guys were saying in the comment section that England and the United States, we have jets before German. But did we use them? Did we use them? It seems like Germany's using them. I'm not using them, but they used to. They used them.
That these resources would have cost the German war machine. Construction of either of these two land cruisers would have taken around 12 months. That's just for construction. Planning the vehicle would take development time, possibly around 3 months, but that's an optimistic time schedule. The estimated completion date would be around mid-1944. Also, somehow the factory manufacturing the Ratte and Monster somehow escaped all Allied bombing over the last year and a bit. Now that our wonder weapons are ready, we need to get them to the front lines. When both vehicles are becoming operational, it will be just before around D-Day, so they would have most likely been transferred to the Eastern Front to help achieve a breakthrough. It would have been unlikely for the land cruisers to be used on the Italian front due to the mountainous nature of the region. They may have seen use during the Warsaw Uprising, which happened just a month after our land cruisers may have been finished. For the Warsaw Uprising, our land cruisers will be in their element as they're sieging a target that didn't have air support and didn't have heavy artillery.
That is crazy.
In real life, Germany did deploy their heaviest assault guns there.
Bro, that looks scary, man.
And the Karl Graf.
That looks scary.
This is the only battle where the land cruisers may have done well.
Man, I cannot imagine people living in those days, man.
They were in their element. The land cruisers may have changed the outcome of a few battles, but their cost to manufacture and maintain may have cost the overall war. One thing I want to explore,
the earth
is it even
trembles.
possible to build a weapon system this large? Well, with today's technology, it may just be possible. And I will stress again, it is still not useful as a war-winning weapon. Warfare has changed so much in the last 70 years. This is just purely for pride and wasting resources. I present you with the Bagger 293, the world's largest land vehicle in history. It's a bucket excavator, very similar in design to the Bagger 288, which is more famous and known throughout media. Bagger in German translates to excavator. The job of this excavator is to mine coal in a surface mine in Germany. Now guess which company made the Bagger 288? Guess who? Go on. Krupp. That's right, the same company that designed and would have made the two land cruisers. The same company that made the two 800mm railway guns, Schwergustav and Dora. It took them a few years, but it looks like someone finally got to live out their design fantasies. Let's look at some of the stats. The Bagger 288 weighs in at 13,500 tons. Construction of it finished in 1978, and back then it was the heaviest land vehicle in the world. That title was yielded to its bigger brother in 1995, the Bagger 293. The 293 was made by a different company, but is of a very similar design to the 288, remarkably so actually. Height, length, and even the same cubic meters mined a day as the Bagger 288.
That's big.
So, we're just going to disregard the 293 for the sake of this video. The Bagger 288 towers above the countryside at a staggering 96 meters tall and 200 meters long. For standard operations, the Bagger 288 needs 16,550 kilowatts. Unlike the Ratte or Monster, the power for this isn't generated by the Bagger, but is externally provided. Interestingly, the power comes from nearby coal-fired power stations, which is where most of the coal that is mined by the Bagger goes. The maximum speed is under 1 km per hour. Hill climbing capabilities aren't much better either. The maximum gradient it can climb is 5 degrees. All 13,500 tons are spread over 12 caterpillar tracks. The individual tracks are 3.8 meters wide. One thing I should mention about the 288 is that its low speed may be due to the high assembly and high center of gravity. I'm not worried about it tipping over. I'm more worried about the effects of leverage over such a massive arm and that poor little turning base at the bottom that has to balance all of the weight on top. If you want to talk about off-roading capabilities, the 288 made a 22 kilometer trip over a period of 3 weeks. This was when it was relocated.
Wow, bro, look at how big that little thing look. My goodness.
The
Looks
trip
like a
included going
extraterrestrial
over several
invasion
roads and even a railway
monster.
line. The reason that I brought up the bagger is to show that the technology is now there. The 288 was completed in 1978. That's 36 years after 1942, which was when the design for the Land Cruisers was drawn up. There are still loads of issues to overcome. In a world where wartime Germany successfully invaded the United Kingdom before then attacking Russia and winning, then, and only then, when Germany had no immediate enemies, then there might have been a reason to build one of the Land Cruisers. Not to be an actual useful weapon, but for propaganda. It would make the population of a country who owned the landship feel safe and strike fear into their enemies.
That's what I said.
Before I end this video,
That's what I said.
I couldn't end this video without mentioning this monster. If we don't want a massive gun to be tracked, we could always go mount it on an old-fashioned railway gun carriage. We could learn some lessons from the overburdened conveyor bridge F60. The F60 is a conveyor belt system wider than the height of the Eiffel Tower. It's suspended between two monstrous contraptions. The whole thing can move sideways on a custom-built railway. Its purpose is to transfer waste from a coal mine. The machine operated from March 1991
Wow, look at that.
to June 1992. Just look at the carriage design supporting all that weight. It's huge! In the
Humongous.
2000s, it was turned into a tourist site, which is now open to the public. And I advise, if you can't get there in person, to give it a look on Google Maps, because you can even do a 360-degree tour on the gantry spanning the massive 500-meter gap. Anyway, it's time to wrap up this video. I could get lost for hours just reading up on massive earth movers. But it comes down to this. Would the Ratte and Monster have been worth their time to make? No. The amount of resources and time used to build them could have been utilized in a much more effective manner. In fact, it would have been nice if Hitler had bypassed Albert Speer and gave both projects the green light. That way World War II could have ended earlier. The Land Cruisers may have won a battle or two, but it would have cost the outcome of the war.
Look at the little tanks. Very interesting. Very interesting. They were thinking big, man. They were thinking not only a physical war but more psychological war. And I see the tank working as a psychological weapon. Like, imagine Poland, right? As soon as the Germans conquered Poland, imagine that tank just driving by. Bro, I'll be the first one saying, like, man, I don't want nothing to do with this, bro. I'm just staying out. I'm staying out. I don't want nothing to do with this thing because it looks very intimidating. So that in itself is gonna mess you up. Plus the explosions going on, everybody dying. You know, all those things together, it puts you in a position that is dangerous. It's mentally dangerous. Very interesting video, man. Very interesting. I love these videos. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next one. I'm out. Peace.